Thank you all for being here tonight. 3 years ago, I stood on a stage, actually over in that room next to us, and asked people to be a supporter of Solid Ground. And last year, I stood on a stage and asked people to become an evangelist of our mission. And you all answered that call. Folks that were there and folks that are in this room tonight, you attended our social justice salons. You passed along our advocacy alerts to your friends and your neighbors, and you came out and you volunteered with us. And it's been an incredible way in which we can join together as a global and larger community to help solve poverty in our region. And tonight I'm going to ask you to move beyond being a supporter or an evangelist. And I'm going to ask you to become an abolitionist. But before we get there, we got some things to do first. I'm going to share a little bit of what I've learned in my 5 years with Solid Ground. I've seen grandfathers living without heat in the winter. I've seen whole families evicted and walk into our offices with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And I've seen people line up for 2 hours in front of our food banks. This level of poverty in this nation of riches should be unsettling. And when we look at the wealth, the household wealth, we are the richest country in the world, and yet we allow such dramatic examples of harm. So what I'm about to say might be a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm going to say it anyway. There is so much poverty in this country, not in spite of our wealth, but because of it. And this next part might make us a little bit more uncomfortable. A lot of us that are privileged and protected benefit from poverty in ways we may not even recognize. So I'm going to give you a couple of quick numbers. I'm not a math person, but I do have some numbers for you. 1 in 9 people in the US live in poverty, so that is folks that are bringing in less than $15,000 a year in an income. So that's 1 in 9. That's basically like the population of Australia. This is my hand gesture for Australia, But we know that there are people that live just above the line, right? That have limited financial means. 1 in 3 people in this country live on less than $55,000 a year. Now, that may not be categorically poor, but what else can you call it when you're living in a place like Seattle or Bellevue or Renton or SeaTac? And then, of course, we have to acknowledge that poverty isn't just a matter of low income. It's often chronic disease and pain on top of tooth rot, on top of a debt collector harassing you, on top of eviction and homelessness. So poverty isn't just a line. It's a tight ball of agonies that should collectively drive us to moral action. But something I've learned in my 5 years is that poverty isn't just about not having enough money, it's about not having enough choice. And when you don't have a lot of choice, there's a higher likelihood that someone may try to take advantage of you. And a lot of us have been in situations where we've had to take the bad deal because it was the only one in front of us. Now, we know that housing is a hot topic in Seattle, as it is in the country. So let's look specifically about housing, where we've decided to make a lot of choices there. I think that we can all agree that housing is a foundational piece of stability. And we're going to hear a video from my friend Justin a little bit later about how housing has helped him stabilize his own life. But when we think that housing is our stability point, then we also have to recognize that the majority of poor renting families have to rent in the private market. And so a majority of their income is going to go to rent and utilities. They're shut out of home ownership, and they're also shut out of public housing because the waiting list for public housing is no longer measured in years, it's measured in decades. And so when you have limited choice, you might be left with a landlord that doesn't respond to your maintenance requests. And you might be left with a landlord that advertises a rent every month and then adds a bunch of fees that you didn't know were going to come. And you might be left with a landlord that knows that you will never say anything because you can't possibly afford the cost of moving to a new place. You see, poverty persists because other people benefit from it. Now, you may not be the landlord that takes advantage of people, and I hope that y'all in this room are not, because you're in the wrong room, if that is the case. But we have all been consumers of cheap goods and services that the working poor produce. And we may rely on those cheap goods and services that relies on rock bottom pay. So staying on housing and choices for one more moment, I got a couple more numbers for you. In 2020, the US government spent $193 billion on homeowner tax subsidies. So those are things like the mortgage interest deductions. In that same year, we spent $53 billion to direct housing assistance for those in need. So that's things like public housing with those long wait lists and vouchers that helps reduce people's burdens. Now, I said earlier I'm not a math person, but that math does not math to me, and I hope it doesn't math to you. We're giving the most to those that need it to least, and then we have the audacity to ask, how can we possibly afford to do more? Those are the choices that we're making. And so now I want you to imagine a world where we choose to center those in need first, where we develop solutions with them, a world where we care for our most vulnerable first, a world where we look first to uplift those living in the margins because we know that we all will benefit equally. And what if I told you if we took that $193 billion and we applied it to those in need, we could house every single person in this country with stable housing? Those are the choices we're making. Now, I don't know about you, but I am a person about action, so I love to move beyond the imaginary, and I love to move beyond the data, because I don't like numbers, and instead I like to move into committed, constant action. And studies show that people now, more than ever, no matter their political affiliations, believe that poverty is not a product of an individual's failing, but instead is a product of their unfair circumstances. Now is the time for action because now we have seen that the tide has shifted in people's thoughts. And Solid Ground is ready for what is coming next. So tonight I'm inviting you to join our movement to be a poverty abolitionist. To be a poverty abolitionist, you must see poverty as an abomination, something that we simply cannot tolerate. To see the practice of profiting from somebody else's pain as something that corrupts us all. As a poverty abolitionist, you can stand with Solid Ground when we demand new policies and a larger social movement and actions. And to be a poverty abolitionist, we all must divest from poverty in our consumption choices. Now, any good movement needs a good group of committed individuals. So I want y'all to look around. No, I mean, y'all looking at me. Look around, look around, look around. Look at the people next to you. This is our group of committed individuals. This is our group of committed neighbors. This is our groundswell, and it's going to start right here, right now, with you. Thank you very much.